Mr. Thompson, what are some of the fondest memories of your childhood?
Well, as long as we're talking about movies,
Yeah.
I played a lot of sports, so I spent a lot of time playing sports with my friends, but I also developed an interest in uh, movies at a very young age. I remember my dad, he always would film my sports. And so he went out and got a 16 millimeter camera. That's before video. And he uh, he would film my sports. Well, as soon as I discovered that camera and figured out how to use it, I took the 16 millimeter camera and then did a stop action claymation movie of the San Francisco earthquake in 1906. So I created sort of a diorama of the city and then frame by frame made the adjustments. So I don't know where that came from, but it was just by sheer fascination with cameras and the art and craft of filmmaking. That later became a video camera, when technology increased. And I would then start to go with my friends out into the woods and we would improvise and create movies. And we started, of course, probably like most kids do with horror, and we wanted to be really authentic with our gore. So we would go to the supermarket and go to the part of the meat section, which is really bloody and really sort of indecipherable meat. And
Yeah.
so we would buy that up and then we would integrate that into the scenes. I remember we had a scene where this guy was cutting somebody open with a radial arm saw, and then the guy wakes up and he starts pulling his organs out, and it was all, meat from the grocery store,
Yeah.
but it was very, very bloody and looked the part. And so we had a great time. We did countless movies like that, and that sort of was what spawned my fascination with movies, and it was just a good time with friends.
Do you still have those in your
Yeah,
archives? You do?
I do. I do. I have got everything transitioned from the VHS, which is what they were originally on, to DVDs, and I have a stack of them sitting right here. I need to get the DVD because I don't even own a DVD player anymore.
Yeah.
Just live, you know. So I need to get the DVDs transferred into some sort of, computer format, and then I'll be able to watch these things again.
What's the first movie you ever saw, and what kind of emotions did it elicit in you?
I can't be sure, but I definitely remember. It's kind of ironic because I think we're on the 50th anniversary.
Jaws?
Uh, Jaws. My parents took me. I must have been a 6-year-old child. They took me to a drive-in, and I remember seeing Jaws at the drive-in with my family. And I remember very vividly the scene where Robert Shaw, the captain of the boat, is swallowed whole by the shark.
Yeah.
And I remember, it's funny because I don't think parents gave much thought to the rating system at that time. If they wanted to see a movie, they take their kids.
Yeah.
And now I have a kid, and I have to decide whether or not I'm going to traumatize him or not. He saw he saw It, the Stephen King clown
Yeah.
movie, and when that clown bit the hand off of that little kid, it messed him up for months. He was scared to go upstairs without somebody going up there with him. So I was like, I don't remember being traumatized by Jaws. So maybe I was, but it's
Yeah.
just like a constant reflection. Because I remember my parents took me to see Animal House,
Oh,
which
yeah.
was, a R-rated sex romp. And
Yeah.
so I remember seeing that at a very young age as well. So
Yeah, I saw all kinds of like violent movies growing up, honestly, and I don't know if they messed me up or not, but it just felt like, the more violent and the more exciting they were, the more I was interested. So
yeah.
I think every kid feels that way, I guess. How did you find then your way into the filmmaking business, the creative business?
Yeah.
You're a creator, so
Yeah.
um,
Well, I when I was I think 12 or 13, I saw E.T., the extraterrestrial. And that was a transformative. I became obsessed with it. I saw it like 13 times in the theaters. And I wrote the entire screenplay from memory. So at 12 or 13, I wrote my first screenplay, but it was merely a transcription of and I remembered the lines and I would write the dialogue, I could speak it in, verse. And so that I remember being impactful because it became the first sort of true connection to Hollywood movies and my desire to replicate that somehow. So that's sort of timed up when I was doing all those films with my friends. And then I went to college, and it was in the middle of college when you kind of have to decide on a major, right? What special area do you want to study? And I was also playing music in rock bands. I was a singer in a rock band. And
Wow.
so I had two passions. Always knew, I don't know where I kind of knew this, but to chase your passion and your talents, right? And don't worry about, how to make money or what the practical things are. That'll work itself out. Chase your passions and your talents. And so I knew I had two passions and talents, being a rock star or making Hollywood movies. And I literally thought to myself that being a rock star was a much more difficult road because if you failed, that was kind of it. Whereas in the movie business, I felt like if you failed as an artist, you could shift into the corporate side of it and become a studio executive,
Yeah.
right? So it seemed like there was a fallback plan in the
Yeah.
movie business route, and it seemed more. There was also there was college for that. You could go to film school, right? And
Yeah.
music was less so. I mean, I guess you could go to certain music schools, but so anyways, I chose film and I applied to a number of film schools. I didn't get into USC, and then I had UCLA, NYU, and a couple of smaller ones. And so I knew that, you know, Martin Scorsese and Oliver Stone and Spike Lee and all these luminaries had gone to NYU. So I was like, that's where I'm going. So I went to NYU and it was a eye-opening experience because most of the kids there were kind of not interested in narrative filmmaking, but rather experimental and sort of very unorthodox stuff. So I was kind of an oddball in all my classes because I wanted to tell traditional stories with a three-act structure and they wanted to shine lights on disco balls and weird basements and with no narrative. And I didn't get it.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of an odd experience. I had a few connections there that were meaningful and people that ended up going to Hollywood and doing some things. But anyway, so I graduated and I knew that the only way this is going to work is to go to Hollywood. So I packed up the U-Haul and drove down to Hollywood, got a crappy apartment in North Hollywood with cockroaches under the refrigerator and
Wow.
moved in with my college buddy from NYU who'd made the same choice. And we both and once again I was lucky enough to have a job waiting for me because at NYU they allow you to do internships for school credit, and they provide you all these opportunities to try and get an internship. And I got an internship with this producer, and then the woman who I worked for, her father ran Showtime Pictures in Hollywood, which was like the cable channel. And so she set me up with an internship as soon as I got out there. That was for about 3 months. And so I was able to get the apartment, get the internship, and it was $300 a week and just pay the bills. But then when that ran out, I was back to that story I opened with, which is I don't have a job, I don't have any connections, and I went into that temp service. That led to the Scott Rudin opportunity, and from there everything just took off. I made a lot of money working as an assistant because he paid a lot and he had movies going, half a dozen movies going at one time, and I would get the assistant salary on each movie, you know.
Oh,
And then every town we were in, I would get per diem. So we're constantly on the road. So I'm just getting cash
yeah.
handed to me. So it became pretty lucrative for a 22, 23-year-old kid. And so that was the education of a lifetime, traveling with him. Legendary directors like Sidney Pollack or Tom Cruise on the set of The Firm in Memphis, and I'd be at the monitor with Scott because I'm his right-hand man, ready to do whatever he needs. But in that proximity, am able to watch this director decide how he's going to block a scene and decide how to get a performance out of an actor. Watching Tom Cruise, contribute to that conversation and have his contribution, and so. Or I'd be in a hotel room in New York City with screenwriter Steve Zaillian, who wrote like Schindler's List and Moneyball, one of the great screenwriters of our time, and watching the producer, Scott Rudin, work with him to resolve some sort of issue in a scene. And I'm just, the fly on the wall learning about screenwriting at 23 from these masters. So it was really a unique, that's why I talk about the luck of this, but unique experience. And from that, because I was dealing, and I'm placing calls as a 23-year-old punk kid to heads of studios, and I'm in the meetings with Scott with heads of studios, and so what eventually sort of imbued me with was a confidence that I can belong here. I'm worthy of this place and these activities, and so it's a difficult confidence to come by because it's a very intimidating business.
Yeah.
It's also a secretive business, and it kind of feels like I was saying, like there's a secret, knock to get behind the door to the club. But it was from that experience that I gained the confidence and also the knowledge that there was basically two ways into the movie business for me to step out of the assistant realm and into the artist's realm, which is what I wanted to do. And that was to either be like Scott Rudin and have the sheer force of personality through the charm or bully your way into a room, bully your way into relationships, charm your way into situations, and become this producer of some note. The other was to write your way in, because if you have a script that everybody wants, you're powerful. And that's what I learned from watching him sell scripts and buy scripts. And let me make this go away. Uh, and so, uh, so that seemed more my speed. And I hooked up with a fellow assistant that I had worked with at Scott Rudin's when we both had left. And we just started studying the trades, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, and seeing these spec sales every day, scripts selling for $500,000. And we would study what the concept was, who the agents were that sold it, and really trying to take in as much information as possible. And then we decided to try our hand at our first script. And we both had full-time jobs, and so we would get together at 6 o'clock at night, right till midnight,
Yeah.
And we finally typed Fade Out on this action script that was a complete and total ripoff of Die Hard. It was basically Die Hard at the Super Bowl, and it was conceptually tantalizing enough that it was hard for producers to just dismiss it. But I don't even know. I'd have to go back and find a draft of it somewhere and look at it. But it was not good. And so what happened was we needed an agent. We had to find somebody to take it out to the market. And we only knew assistants because we'd both been assistants. So we found this guy at United Talent Agency who was an assistant to a big agent there. In fact, the agent who runs the company. And this assistant has now gone on to become one of the biggest producers in Hollywood to this day.
Oh,
But
wow.
back then he was just a cocky young guy our age who said, I like your script. I'll represent it and impersonate an agent. The calls will come into the agency, so they'll believe it's true because it's the phone number to this agency. And that's what he did. And he went out and he convinced a bunch of producers that he was an agent, and they all got this script that had a concept that they, couldn't pass on because it was, if you missed it and somebody else got it and it actually went, then you'd regret it. So they all took it into their studios, So for the first time ever, I wrote the script with my partner. We found an agent, and it went into every studio in Hollywood, and it was pretty thrilling.
Yeah.
Now, at that level, that's where the rubber met the road, and the actual quality of the script was called into question, and its reminiscence to Die Hard and all these things. And so then studio after studio passed, and it failed. But it was an incredible experience out of the gate, and it was inspiring enough to say, let's try again.
So again, yeah.
So, we tried again, and this time we took some lessons from the failure, and the lessons were we need to be more original, we need to be more authentic, and we need to put more of our own voice into this instead of trying to just rip off other people's success.
Yeah.
But we still needed to do the things that we did in the first place, be conceptual, have mass appeal, find a genre, find a quadrant that you're trying to target. So we wrote this next script, which was kind of a family comedy based on Prince and the Pauper, the classic,
Mm.
but set in the mayoral race in New York City instead. So I think at the time Rudy Giuliani was running for mayor, and his son was a camera hog, and this little kid was making faces at the cameras and the
Yeah.
reporters. And we kind of saw that as a way into the Prince and the Pauper story. But anyways, so we ended up selling that script, and there we go. We were on our way, and that began this process in the early going of, okay, so we've gotten behind the secret door. We know this can be done. Now what do we do? And we were kind of fumbling in the dark for a while, trying to find our voice as writers and just become decent writers, right? And eventually that led to we sold another silly comedy to Paramount, and we wrote this dog movie, and but then we I think we had just eventually gotten to the point where we were maturing as writers, and we wrote the script for Dragonfly. And it was in the writing and selling of the script Dragonfly that not only did we step up to the next level in our career where we were taken seriously as real writers, not just hacks, uh, but we sold it for a lot of money, and it eventually became a big Universal movie with Kevin Costner across the head of the poster. So that was kind of the big transformative moment that then led to many more, opportunities thereafter. But that's a very long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I love when people give such detailed answers. I don't mind long, as long as it's interesting. So,
Right. Okay.
so I was gonna ask you, like, I was gonna ask you about Dragonfly, and what was the inception of it? What were you inspired by to
All
compel
right.
to write? What compelled you to write this
It
story?
was there was a book that I had read. It was called Into the Light, I believe, and it was about this doctor in Seattle who worked on a children's terminal cancer ward. And as a course of daily events, some of these kids would die, and some of them would be resuscitated after having been dead for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, what have you. So this whole book is about this doctor recounting how some of these kids would come back and tell stories of near-death experiences and how they had these very real experiences. And uh, but it was so filled with undeniable facts. Like, for example, these kids would all talk about being out of their bodies and looking down on the doctors and nurses in the room working on them. And so it occurred to somebody, well, this to prove whether or not this is happening, why don't we put some magazine photos on top of the ventilators? And the only way a child would know that they're there is because they're out of their body.
Yeah.
And sure enough, one of the kids said, well, "Why are there these pictures of giraffes on top of their ventilator?" Whatever. So I read that stuff, and I'm somebody that's constantly searching for validation of faith. I want desperately to believe in God, life after death, meaning, purpose to all of this, hope. And but I'm very sort of analytical and searching for proof, even though I understand it's a faith-based concept.
Yeah.
Uh, but I want help to help my faith along, and I do that by the scientific side of it, by searching for sort of undeniable facts that
Yeah.
or coincidences that are too absurd to ignore, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, anyways, that book was sort of the inspiration of the idea, which was, is there a story within the realm of children and near-death experiences? Because I also felt what I wanted to do was reach people with this concept of, suggesting hope, suggesting that there might be something beyond, and how exciting that is, because it's exciting to me. And that's the energy and the message and the idea I wanted to somehow impart. But then you got to figure out, well, okay, how do you make that a hero's journey, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the part where we really did the heavy lifting, my partner and I, to come up with this notion that a doctor had lost his Doctors Without Borders wife, and then these children were coming back, and he's grieving her loss, and these children are coming back saying, "I saw your wife, and she was trying to tell me something," and now he becomes obsessed because what could she possibly be trying to tell him? And I don't remember where in the process that we came up with the notion of her having been pregnant and of there being a baby that is still alive. But whatever that moment was, it was like, wow, imagine that, because it's not just some message from the beyond, I'm
Yeah.
sorry or
Yeah.
whatever. It's
It was
something
really,
tangible.
yeah, it was the
Yeah,
window into the story, basically.
right. And so that was kind of the moment where we had everything, and then we banged that thing out. And the script that we wrote, though, was very different from the movie that came out,
Oh,
because
really?
what happened was
Sorry, sorry to interrupt you. When was the first draft written? Like when you had the finished script, when was this? Like late 90s or mid
yeah, I think it was 1998 thereabouts.
90s? Okay.
Yeah, and we had written a script that was much more. There was a woman in the script that was in the hospital all the time with her daughter who had a chronic disease, and so the daughter and her mother, who was kind of a not a love interest but almost a soul interest, because he's still grieving
Yeah.
his wife, and this woman sort of helps heal his heart. But what it didn't have is a lot of the sort of and we had the moments of discovering the clues that, oh my God, this thing on a map is a waterfall, and this is a rainbow, and it's leading him to the tallest waterfall in the world, but it's in the Yanomami jungle, and the people that live there don't even deal with human beings.
Yeah.
So we had all of the sort of, and him racing down there and all the thrills of that. But what we didn't have were sort of the horror elements that they put into it to sort of make it feel like it was a horror thriller. And I understand why they did that, because, there's a tendency in Hollywood to try and put
Replicate.
things in a genre box,
Yeah.
so that people can touch it, smell it, and feel it and identify it. Oh, that's what that is. Because
Yeah.
they fear if people don't know exactly what something is, then they don't know how to, touch it, smell it, and feel it, so they don't go. And
Yeah.
so I get it. I think our script was better than what they ended up doing with it, because I think it was way more emotional and way more philosophical, and an exploration of the concept of life after death and what that means. But what I do take satisfaction in is that the movie kept the central story of what I laid out in the beginning, which is this man who's grieving his dead wife. The children are seeing her near-death experiences, and it is through this taking all the risks of listening to these kids and risking his career and everything that it leads him to discover he has a baby waiting for him in the jungles of South America. So always thought that was a great story,
Yeah.
and
It,
so the
great.
fact that it survived as a story was gratifying to me. But there's other aspects that are, disappointing, because you wish that it would somehow pristinely be exactly as you intended. But as I've learned over the years, that just rarely the case, very rarely the case. And you just kind of have to come to accept that and be okay with it.
And did you guys like what when you were writing it? Did you guys have a specific actor in mind for 𝘿𝙧𝙖𝙬𝙧𝙧, or did you just write it like that without thinking about it, actors or
I mean, you're always thinking about who the big A-list stars of the day are that could be in the role, but I generally try not to completely pigeonhole myself because it's almost like when you do a rough cut of a movie and you put temp music in and you
yeah?
put some awesome song that's really expensive and it fits perfectly.
And then
If you watch it,
you
yeah, you
cannot
watch
get
it
it.
too many times, you're never going to afford it. You can never use it, and so you almost shoot yourself in the foot because you fall in love with what you created there,
Yeah,
and you're never going to be able to replace that feeling
yeah,
because of the where. So the actor thing is kind of similar. I try not to commit myself too much because the odds of it being that guy. That's only happened one time to me where the guy that I had in mind was the guy that came on board the script, and that was Tom Cruise in a different project. But in this one, I envisioned guys like Mel Gibson, guys like Costner, guys like Clooney at the time, all of whom were in the conversation when it was time for casting.
okay,
And so, it was one of those things where also when you're writing something that's working and is feels authentic and is emotionally substantive to you when you're writing it, um, it's almost like those are the ones that sort of uh, have their own world in which they exist in your mind, and it's not about Hollywood casting or whatever.
yeah,
I saw the guy that I was writing.
yeah.
That's who I saw in my mind,
I get
and
it.
and yeah,
I understand. You were like you were so enamored and satisfied with what you were writing that you were not like thinking about in terms of, oh, who do I want to cast? Who would I want to do
right.
this? Like,
More about just being immersed in a story and following it in your mind like you would a book and how you
yeah.
imagine characters in a book, who they are, what they look like.
So how did the script find its way to Kevin? And
Well, I mean, basically what happens is you sell the script. We went out with the script to a bunch of producers who all have deals at the studios. And one of the producers that loved the script was this guy named Mark Johnson, who's a huge producer. He won the Academy Award for Rain Man, done all kinds of things. And so he was the winner of the lottery, if you will, because the studio where he took it in is the one that wanted to buy it. So he became the producer, lucky us, because he was a formidable force. So then he and the studio, with some consultation with us, but at that point we were very newbie. They go about trying to find a director, and this is a long and laborious process because you get directors that raise their hand, but then they're very fickle, and so they have meetings with you. They talk about the things they would want to do and change, and maybe you even do drafts for them. And then they end up sometimes just drifting away and going off on this other project that they're working on because that's how they need to work. They need to have multiple plates in the air. The one that goes is the one that they go to, right? And so anyways, this eventually led to this sort of unorthodox choice at director of this guy named Tom Shadyac,
yeah,
who had been wildly successful with comedies
yeah,
like Ace Ventura and
higher,
some of them.
higher.
Yeah. And so, but he'd also done, I think, Patch Adams and indicated
Yeah,
an interest in drama. He had a lot of personal connections to this material because of family members and some personal experiences that he'd been through. So he was really personally drawn to it. And so he uh, he was the one that, in consultation with the producer in the studio, begin the process of, all right, who's the actor? And so then a list is developed and they consult with the agencies, of which, there's a handful that represent these guys. And it's always an interesting dance when you're dealing with movie stars of this caliber. And it happens every time on every project that I work on that gets submitted for the consideration of the big, the big 10, if you will, the big 10 movie stars of the world. And at the time, that's always a changing list.
Yeah.
But it's a process whereby everybody wants to be able to sort of dabble, but withdraw unscathed. No one wants to insult anyone. No one wants to offend anyone. And there's a very passive aggressive game that takes place where sometimes there are direct offers. Here it is. We want you. Here's $20 million offer. Will you be in this movie? And sometimes it's more like the agency says, we'll send it over to Kevin, and we'll send it to Mel, we'll send it to George. And it ends up inevitably getting into the hands of all these guys because they don't want to be, have a role that could be the role that launches them or is very successful or wins them an award. They don't want that to be snatched away from them by one of their peers, of which there's just a handful, right? So they're constantly sort of swarming the same projects, but in a way that doesn't make them look desperate and it doesn't make them look like they've overcommitted. And so in that process, sometimes, somebody will rise to the top, and then inevitably they want to meet with the director because the movie star is placing his career in the hands of the director and really wants to feel the comfort that they'll be in good hands. So, at some point, Kevin, just sort of rose from that process as the guy that wanted to meet with the director. And he felt comfortable with Tom and his vision and the way they went. It was a pretty quick process once he came on board. It was a bit of a process to get to him raising his hand and going through that dance with all the rest of them at the same time. Yeah, it was pretty thrilling for me because I felt like he could embody everything that we had written in that role. He had that sort of ability to be strong and also make you cry, And so I was thrilled with the choice, and away they went.
So I was
Now,
gonna, oh, sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna ask you, but you kind of already like answered. Like, how did you feel when he came on board? Like, how did you
Yeah.
feel about him? Like, I guess you said you were thrilled, so you were pretty
Yeah, I
happy.
mean, it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes it's out of your hands, and an actor comes on board that you think is not only wrong for the part, but just wrong for the commercial success of it, just wrong. And that's tough.
Mm.
That's really tough because you poured your heart and soul into this, and now this one element that was beyond your control. And that's the thing. You write these things to get them made, right? And actors and movie stars are what get things made. And they're like unicorns. You're searching out in this fairy tale wilderness looking for a unicorn. And when the unicorn comes along and allows you to, pet its mane
Yeah.
and be in your movie, you got to be grateful because the movie's now getting made. And the trickiest part of that process is when you have to somehow square, this is not who I wanted, but the movie's getting made, and coming to terms with that. This was not the case here because I was thrilled with him. I mean, this is one of our greatest actors of the last several generations. He's the American Jimmy Stewart. He's of the day. They're both Americans, but he's the Jimmy Stewart of today.
Yeah.
And so I just love what he does all the time. And so I was thrilled to have him, and we, first time we met him was on the set, actually.
Oh, so you
and he
met
was,
him.
oh yeah, yeah, no,
Okay.
and he was very, very gracious and complimentary of the script. But little did he know it wasn't the script that we had written. He
Good.
read a different version of it. But yeah, no, it was very, very exciting. And there was a moment where, speaking of the irony of that, when the director, when we went to the set and the director said, Kevin, come over. These are the two guys that are the whole reason that you're here. And he met us and said some nice things about the script and what have you. And then the director, Shadyac, quieted down the whole set and demanded every crew member's attention to him so that he could introduce us as the guys that conceived this entire idea, the reason we're all here getting a paycheck and making this movie and whatever. And so it was a nice moment that sort of put a little balm on our sort of wounded egos that the script had been altered in such a way that we didn't love it, but we were thrilled to be there.
Yeah, and like, did you ever try to like do something else with Kevin, like other projects? Like, you ever thought about it?
Yeah,
Just
no, I mean,
curious.
he's still in for me, it's all about the the role. And if there's a role that's in his age range that I've written, then he's in every conversation like that, and definitely somebody that we reach out to. I think most of the roles that I've written kind of tap out at 50, kind of tap out at that Ben Affleck
Yeah,
age. I haven't written a hero role for somebody in their 60s, although he can certainly play younger. But yeah, I mean, you'd be so lucky to have him in anything you do, and certainly he's somebody that I certainly will continue to think about for anything that I write.
yeah. Yeah, I always felt that Dragonfly had a lot of quite a few similarities with Field of Dreams. Honestly, I
Hmm.
don't know the essence of it, like the core story that this journey
Right,
of the hero, like you don't know what the journey is. Like, it's a journey,
right, right,
and the movies, the both movies, kind of take you on a journey that you did not anticipate going. And
right,
I always felt like that was similar in, like, they shared kind of the same DNA, if you will.
right. Well,
And
you're watching the same guy emote
yeah,
some
no,
of the same emotions that you're going on. It's just a totally different world.
yeah, yeah, I always felt that. And what are your thoughts on the final film? You've kind of already shared that, but
Well, here's the big takeaway. Um, it wasn't very successful commercially coming out um, in theaters.
yeah,
It has since gone on to be a pretty big success in the aftermarket. Plays all the time, all over the world. I still get residual checks for it, 20 something years later.
yeah,
And 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 I haven't watched it in a long time, but I do remember one thing, and that is, this gets back to the core story and its impact and the intended uh, hope to move audiences and inspire the notion of hope and faith. And that's when I was sitting in a dentist chair and I had a dental hygienist who was like a substitute for the dentist that week. And I'd never seen her before. I didn't know her. So inevitably, while she's working on my teeth, she's asking me, "What do you do for a living?" This, that, the other.
yeah,
And it comes out that I was a screenwriter and I wrote this movie, Dragonfly. And the dental hygienist starts to tear up and get tears in her eyes and proceeds to tell me that there was a period in her life where she was very dark and was considering suicide. And she watched this movie and it took her off the ledge and inspired her not to do that. And I remember just sitting there thinking, wow, talk about the power of movies
yeah,
and talk about how, for me, this one testimony of this one person kind of makes up for everything. It's kind of enough. I'm
Yeah,
good.
there
You
you
know
go.
what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that was a really powerful gift that I was given as the sort of one of the creators of it that that really, made me feel like, you can be a bit of a perfectionist about these things. So don't beat yourself up too much and be happy with the fact that you reached millions of people and look at this person that, was really profoundly effective. So that's great. That's fantastic.
Um, as a creator yourself, like how do you see the situation of filmmaking, not only in America right now, but all over the world, like just the creative part of it, like the creation, like it seems like all these giant movies, like comic book movies have eroded what was
Yeah,
once like what there was room once for these mid-budget like thrillers and action films or comedies, and
you're
they all
right.
ended up on the big screen. Now these mid-budget films go to streaming, and
Yeah.
seems like cinemas and theaters are just for these theme rides, basically.
Yeah. No, you've summed it up well. All of that's true. Um, in terms of where it's going, I don't know. Nobody in the industry knows. It's all in flux. Saw an article the other day that polled theater owners, and they all said within 20 years, if not 10, the theater business is over, at least as it's currently constituted. I personally am a big believer that people will always go into dark rooms together to watch movies. And you're always surprised at how conventional wisdom seems to have it all figured out, and then something turns things around and changes things, and all of a sudden you're back to old traditions and the way things were. So I just never, but I do believe in my core that this movie going experience is a shared emotional experience for people that will always want in some form or another. I just refuse to believe that we're all gonna just look at YouTube videos on our phone. I can't I can't accept that. So all I can do is continue to work and write with what inspires me, and certainly that's not writing superhero movies, and it's writing the movies that you referred to, and it's tougher, of course, it's more difficult to sell these things because they used to have large development budgets, and they would take a chance on lots of different kinds of scripts, and then they would try and put them together, and the one that got put together first was the one they made, and that's how movies got made for most of my career until the streaming model and the packaging model and the superhero business got underway and sort of changed the paradigm. But there's always hope that it'll return to form. And at the end of the day, there's always going to be room for movies. Look at Anora, which was a little tiny movie that wins the Academy Award, and it's a good movie. It's a really authentic and compelling and interesting movie. And so you kind of have to hold those little things up and say, well, if I were to be the person who poured my heart into that and made that, then it's all worth it. So I don't sort of get too worked up about where the state of the business is, because there's always an indie finance business that will always exist and provide the alternative, provide the the alternative to the studios. And then in terms of the studios, if you can convince some movie star or somebody of note, a filmmaker, that what you've written is really cool, then sometimes that's enough to overcompensate or to compensate for their, you know, rigid slates that are meant to service sequels and IP and superheroes and tent poles and what have you. But yeah, it's harder, and it's a weird thing because in some respects it's harder, but then because of streaming and because of all the additional platforms, you do have many other places to go now. It's just on TV, and you know, I suppose that's better than nothing.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
sure.
I'd rather be in theaters and have people experience movies in the theater, but as somebody who's had, a bunch of projects in their second life, whether that was VHS, DVD, streaming, what have you, well, those are all on TV now, so, where do you get on your your high horse and get offended? Because I haven't been offended by the fact that most people now watch Dragonfly on their TV.
Oh yeah,
So, so if it starts there, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world.
yeah. My very last question, I could have talked to you about so many other things you've created and written and produced. What are your very next projects? What are you working on right now?
Well, to be candid with you, I was recently diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so I've been battling that for the last few weeks and months, and
I'm
I
sorry.
kind of am focused on that as my day by day. But before that diagnosis came down, I had a big sci-fi movie with a big producer and a wonderful Spanish director attached. And we hope to be going out to the town with it soon. And it's original. So it's one of those challenging movies in the fact that it doesn't have an established IP and the kind of safety valves that studios and streamers are looking for to make executives feel more comfortable saying yes because something has already existed and been successful in a different format. But we're hopeful that the concept is sort of mass appeal and clever enough that it'll rise above and have a chance. So that's my number one uh, project that I'm sort of excited about. And then my partner and I wrote a movie about Dale Earnhardt and his death at the Daytona 500 NASCAR race and his relationship to Michael Waltrip, who won that very same race, his protege. And it's sort of a sports movie with a lot of heart. It's the ultimate underdog story because the protege was 0 and 437 or something. He'd never won a race in
Wow.
NASCAR until Dale Earnhardt took him under his wing, and then Dale died helping him win. It's a great story, and it was at Sony, and then they put it in turnaround to the producers who are now trying to find a new home for it. And so that one is exciting to me because I think it's one of the better things that I've ever written. And then in terms of what's next, I have some smaller things. I have a faith-based movie that I'm trying to make. That's a very difficult. The bad news is that it's not a superhero multi-quadrant movie that's sort of an obvious no-brainer. The good news is that I believe the lead role, there's a couple of roles for the man and the woman, are the best things I've ever written and could potentially appeal to actors of some note that are able to help us secure the financing and get it made. I've been talking to a lot of the faith-based companies, and it's tricky because they tend to want true stories because their audiences are sort of more interested in seeing the sort of realization of a story that they know is true, and it sort of validates their faith
Yeah, they're
to
better.
see it brought to life because it's a true story, right?
Yeah,
So
it can
that's a
happen.
bit of a hurdle, right? So that's a bit of a hurdle, but it's not an insurmountable hurdle, and I'm pushing to make that, especially with what I'm going through right now. I'm undoubtedly as close to God, let's say, as I have ever been, and so I feel almost compelled to really try and make this movie because I just feel like there's a synergy with where I'm at right now and what that movie's about. So that's kind of my focus at the moment. And as for what's next, I just sort of take it day by day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, Mr. Thompson, thank you very much for taking the time and to talk to me. And all the best of luck to you for your battle, for your
thank
health.
you,
Uh,
thank you.
it really touched me, and when you mentioned it, just thank you. You just
Yeah,
you were so eloquent and shared so many things that I wanted to ask you about, and I still maintain that Dragonfly is very overlooked. Even though it's in the final form, it's not quite like the movie you had envisioned when you wrote it.
Right.
I still think that the journey takes you on
Yeah.
at its core is still the powerful message or
Right.
journey you wrote.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
So
And I appreciate the invitation to speak to you, and it's my pleasure to do so. And I wish you all the best. And
thanks.
it was great to talk with you.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
You too. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.